talk about this in my book. I was so angry at my father for 28, 29 years that I was so ready to cut him out of my life. And yet, having even just doing a little bit of work, when he came out of the closet, rather than having a visceral attack and I hate you and get out of here, I had such deep empathy for him because it kind of showed me his humanness. And granted, he's my father. But at the end of the day, he's just another man.
Welcome back to the Power and Purpose podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in and investing your time and your energy into today's episode. I truly appreciate it. And I'm super excited for today's guest. We have Johnny King. He is a men's transformational coach, author, and podcast host, helping people create physical, emotional, relational, and financial fitness. Johnny, thank you so much for being here on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Vanessa. This is a treat, a privilege. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And I love asking people my signature question, who are you and who are you not?
I am a worthy man, a powerful man, a humble man. I'm a leader. And who am I not? I'm not a follower or a pleaser. Many of the things that I used to associate to who I was in let's say my earlier years. So that's a quick version of it, but we can dig into any of that or none of it.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. It reminds us of the transformation that we're constantly making, whether it's on a daily basis or some people are more like a monthly, yearly type of change, and then some of us
Mm.
are like every day, like I'm not who I was yesterday. So it allows our ego to like constantly upgrade, I believe. So I love to get into just like a little bit of your history before your journey, like the 2.0, 3.0 version of Johnny King. So tell us about, I'm really interested to hear, like, tell us about what was happening during the 2010 recession for you. What was that like?
2010 recession, is that you said, or 2020 COVID? Which one? We've been through so much.
Okay. I
Did
have 2010 here, but
2010.
it was
2010,
either
yes, yes,
recession.
yes. Yes, gosh. 2008, 2010, for me personally was probably the biggest ego death of my life. So yes, there's been a lot over the last 15, 16 years. That was more or less when, just in a period of 3 years, my mom passed away. I'd gotten married. My father had come out of the closet that he was gay. And then my ex decided to move on to greener pastures. So it was a tumultuous and a very awakening 3 years, to say the least. And it was the very first major record scratch, if you will, in kind of the trajectory that I thought my life would take. And of course, in retrospect, I'm so grateful that it did take that, because that was an awakening that I needed. But it hasn't stopped. That was just the first of many, let's say, ego deaths.
And what was that like? Because that sounds like a lot that you listed there. So like during was it destabilizing or were you just resilient and pushing through and you kind of realized later like, oh wow, that was like an ego death?
No, very destabilizing. Um, I didn't have much of a healthy male role model. Certainly was raised by primarily the, let's say, the women of the village. My mom primarily, my oldest sister, school teachers, Sunday school teachers, art teachers. Had a few male role models as coaches, because I was always an athlete, but some were good and some of them were horrible. So yeah, I would say a big part of my sense of self and identity came from come it's interesting. I read or heard something that you had said. I can't remember exactly where, but just about how sometimes um addictions can be ways that people find just safety in, actually, right? And find their, as it relates to their nervous system, right? um
Mhm.
Find their safety and their peace in, as much as, and as destructive as coping mechanisms and addictions can be. But my coping mechanism that I've now come to really realize, of people pleasing, and primarily female pleasing was really a little boy's way to keep himself safe. So that to lose my mom and then to ultimately lose my ex, and I was very close with her mother as well. To lose all the women that I held so near and dear to my heart at the time, and then also to kind of have the identity of whom I thought my father was to also kind of blow up in my face. Yeah, to say the least, was majorly dysregulating for sure.
Dysregulating, yeah,
Yeah,
and it's so important for us to have compassion for ourselves, even looking back and during those experiences, because it's like
yeah.
we don't there's no way that you could predict how to navigate something like that. So that was kind of like maybe one of the more recent rock bottoms, ego deaths. When was your transition? I'm sure you might have had another rock bottom or another couple other ego deaths, but when did you really start to feel a little bit more empowered? Or for another way of saying that is that you start to integrate your father's identity shift and some of the other things that were happening like in your personal life.
Mm, yeah, I would say I just started noticing that kind of like clockwork every 18 to 24 months, I felt like I had to reinvent myself, which was really, or call it a shedding of you know, an exoskeleton or a cocoon, if you will. But that was really painful. I think I just found myself being addicted to um, growth. And I wrestled with, is this just another? Because I've certainly been to so many retreats and so many seminars and so many things and seen the groupies who kind of show up and pay the money and get the high, but they don't actually do the work. And so I was questioning whether or not I was just, was it another way of avoiding um, just my own insecurities, or was I really moving towards something? So, yeah, I would say to answer your question, the most recent and probably the most just powerful for me, and a lot of what I feel like resonates with what I've seen and heard on your podcast and seen you write about is just really learning how to stabilize my nervous system. And I don't believe I really now I can see it, but I can see it also in so many men that I've worked with over the last 10, 15 years. And for me, though, I think it was actually really kind of in the shadow. It was not in my conscious awareness. And so it was through some medicine journeying that really woke me up to like, oh my goodness, how much everything I've been doing, or in a lot of ways, I was seeking safety. Um, because my nervous system was just highly, activated, and where that came from as a little boy, and then how that's been affecting my relationships and my business decisions and everything else going forward. So that literally has been within the last year and a half, 2 years.
And the nervous system regulation, it's so important because when we're dysregulated, we're disempowered and we are
Yeah.
coping with things like you're mentioning, and we are sacrificing ourselves and people pleasing. And I
Mm.
find it really interesting. You actually said that you had an addiction to people pleasing, and thank you for that. That's an interesting perspective. I mean, I think anything that is disempowering us or where we're self-sacrificing our health mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or physically can be an addiction. And so maybe that might resonate with someone.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think so. Because I think anytime that we're getting our needs met emotionally, right, in a way that there's either really obvious signs or subtle signs. If we're not really tracking or achieving the things that we want to achieve, then typically I've found that we're fulfilling our needs in a way that is neutral at best, if not negative, and taking us in the opposite direction than what we want to go. So there's something to be said about getting older, and as Mark Manson says, having the subtle art of not giving an F, just not giving Fs anymore, and just realizing that you're loved and you don't have to do anything to achieve it, or I should say to receive love and self love. Something to be said about yeah, the journey that I feel like men and women, all of us are on, but just how much peace and fulfillment and joy there is on the other side of regulating that nervous system and finding peace within yourself versus looking for it anywhere but within yourself.
Powerful. It almost seems impossible when you're still dysregulated, but just knowing that it's
100%.
possible.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think that's what's beautiful about what you're doing is bringing to light. I think it's one of those things where if you just see that it's possible in someone else, then you have to believe there's a part, there's a part of you that's got to believe that it's possible for you too. So if anyone's listening, and to your point, it's yeah, in so many different ways, in different ways of my life, did I feel like okay, I'm I want to move, I want to achieve something, but I feel like it's so impossible to get there. But I saw that he did it or she did it, and like so I never gave up. But man, has this journey been so much longer and more challenging than I thought it would be in terms of growth. Uh, but at the end of the day, so worth it. But yeah, it's challenging at times for sure.
Yes, yes. So when in your journey did you like start the leading the men's group or hosting the podcast or doing the books or and I know you're also a successful business person too. So was that like the bridge to kind of doing more of the growth and personal development for other people? What did that look like?
Yeah, short of the long, mom passed away, father came out, ex-wife left. Everything that I thought my identity, my life looked like crumbled. So um, one of the things, those things that came to me in one of those moments when I was like, okay, I can literally either pick up something, whether it be a bottle, or some sort of drug. I can go down that road, which I know where that leads, or I can start to serve in some way, and that's what I just started doing. I started a gym for middle-aged Midwestern women, and lo and behold, even though I was so insecure and I thought I was going to fail, that blew up, and that turned into women's coaching, which I did for over 10 years. And then my amazing coach Christine Hasler challenged me to shift into men's coaching. So that was right before 2020. So 2019,
Ah,
I was actually at a buddies of mine, people probably know Lewis Howes, at his Summer of Greatness. And I forget, it was like, oh gosh, what was her name? Dr. Totally blanking me in the moment. But she did say, what part of you needs to die for another part of you to be born? And it became very clear to me that I needed to let go of the safety of working with women. And I felt like it was very much self-serving in a way that that was fulfilling my need for safety and uh, self-esteem, significance, value, but I wasn't being challenged and I wasn't ultimately feeling like I was growing. So I was at a mastermind out in San Diego, and Christine Hasler challenged me to step into what it meant for me to be a man and maybe support other men in the same thing. So that was at the end of 2018. So 2019, I started my meetings of men in Denver, Colorado, which is where I am now, and they blew up. And we had 90, 100 men showing up every month to talk about their feelings, which was unheard of. And you should have seen the comments on my Facebook ads. Guys would either literally poo-pooing, and then other guys stepping away like, dude, it was kind of like man 1.0 versus man 2.0, men who are no longer willing to stand for like, men saying, well, if you need to learn how to be a man, you're not a man at all, or, this is so dumb, y'all are gay, to other men be like, come on, man, like clearly this isn't working for us, this older way of masculinity, if you will. And so that was going so well until 2020, of course. And then no longer could we do men's retreats, which I was doing up in the mountains, or in-person events. So I just shifted to doing more, you know, online men's gatherings and everything
mhm.
else. So again, I think I said the short of the long, and this is actually the short of the long, but it's obviously still long. That lent itself during 2020 to writing the book and starting the podcast and getting in touch with more and more men across the country, across the world. So at the end of the day, I think it just became something that I realized for a lot of guys, they just needed a place to be heard,
Yeah.
and most of them probably are living those lives of quiet resignation, and so they're just kind of dying inside, not knowing exactly where to turn. They just know it's not working, but they also don't know what to do. So that
Yeah.
was the beginning of all of this kind of men's work while I've been simultaneously growing myself, of course. Because I
Yeah.
don't know if I've ever really think I'll achieve or get to any point specifically, but I think it's just a growth journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Integration is multi-layered.
Yes, yes,
Absolutely. You said something, and I want to hone in on it
yeah,
before we move on to other things. You said the old way of doing masculinity. And I think this is important because I don't like to use the term toxic masculinity, although it
same.
exists. It exists. I just don't throw it around very loosely. So when people kind of inquire, to me, if I'm talking to someone about it, I see the old way of masculinity being like a lot of suppression, suppressing feelings, thoughts, I don't know, suppressing desires in certain cases. What do you what is your perspective on that? What is the old way of masculinity to you?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with all that. I think you're absolutely spot on. And I think it's not toxic masculinity or toxic femininity as it is just wounded behavior. Let's just call it what it is, right? So, and that's what it ultimately is that if we're just talking about men, masculinity, it's just wounded men who are hurt and they either suppress everything and they don't talk and they eventually bottle up and it leaks out in certain ways. You have the nice guys that are passive aggressive and they're, wolves in sheep's clothing, right? Or you have the bad boys who are, you know, again, don't really care about anyone and that's part of their shtick as well. And then I think, healthy masculinity is more or less the era that we're in of men moving towards actually doing the work and actually healing and actually being dependable men who other men, women and children can feel safe around. So it's just, yeah, it's just wounded men who act out in a variety of ways. And we see it all across the world. The vast majority of all the horrible things that go on in the world are wounded men who are acting out, killing people or, abusing, manipulating, cheating. It's just it's sad, but I think it's up to all of us healers, if you will, men and women, to do the work and show again what's possible and create a wave, a tsunami, if you will, of growth and healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that because it seems like it might take out some of the judgment and ridicule for someone being in their wounded energy, instead of like shaming them like your behavior is toxic. It could be toxic, but if we have compassion, I just feel like that's more of a compassionate way of observing what's happening, like, oh, she's in her wounded feminine, or that
Hmm.
person might be navigating their wounded masculine, and then I think it allows support and conversation to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. That's the greatest part of doing the work because take for example, I talk about this in my book. I was so angry at my father for 28, 29 years that I was so ready to cut him out of my life. I could care less. Granted, I'm still also reeling from a mom who passed away early, um, at a younger age. And yet, having even just doing a little bit of work, when he came out of the closet, rather than having a visceral attack and I hate you and get out of here, I had such deep empathy for him because it kind of showed me his humanness. And granted, he's my father. But at the end of the day, he's just another man who's on his path, and has his own past of dysfunction. So we obviously can't choose the parents that we are blessed with um, or not blessed with if they're not in our lives. If there's those that are listening who you know didn't have that, but we still get to choose, right? Uh, how we ultimately respond to our childhood, right?
Yeah.
And learn to heal and pivot from that. So I think that's the
Yeah.
important part.
I'm curious to know, what is your relationship with your dad now?
Um, yeah, I'd say we're best friends. I don't know if we're best friends. I would say I have a very, very close relationship with him. Love him to death. As a Christian, I feel like it's my duty and it's the best way that I know how to love him as I hope any sons that I have in the future would love me, which is like, I don't, you know, his lifestyle isn't one that I would choose for myself, but I don't, it's, who am I to really dictate? And what he does behind closed doors is not really of my responsibility. I do know that anytime that I show up in any relationship and I come from a place of love, right? I think Tony Robbins says that it's like every form of, no, it wasn't, I forget who said it ultimately, but every form of communication is either an act of love or a cry for help. So in my interactions with him, I always want to come from a place of love. When before for 29 years, was just always like headbutting. And what it really was a little boy just saying, "Hey, Dad, do you love me? Do you see me? You know, can you please at least acknowledge me? Are you proud of me?" And I had that moment where I got to love him and just tell him I don't really care his sexual orientation, but I love him and I care for him and I see him and acknowledge him, and that has healed our relationship tenfold. So it's a beautiful relationship now.
That is so beautiful, and that is the proof of integration. And for me, I my core wound was abandonment because I walked in on my dad with his
Mm,
best partner, and that was the announcement of his shift in sexuality and gender preference. So,
wow,
um,
wow.
and that was different because it's like I discovered it and then forgot about it, and it was a repressed memory and they
Mm,
rediscovered it later. But we're
mm,
best friends now, and it's I also had to go through I had to release a lot of expectations
mm.
of the dad that I wish I would have had, or what
There you
other
go.
people had, or some of those things. And also honoring my own masculine energy. I think for a while it was like that's the only masculine energy in my life that I have right now, before I started dating, of course. But then it's like, no, like I could access both feminine and masculine within me. Not that I'm trying to be more masculine than what I am now. I feel like I'm in a natural energy or a natural flow. It ebbs and flows for me.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, integration. This topic of integrating these wounds that we have within the family, whether it's based off of masculinity or femininity or not. I think it's just so important to integrate some of this.
But isn't it true? I mean, you can speak for yourself, of course, and I can too, in the sense of like, I just feel like when I shifted and came from a place of love, not only for him, but also for myself, the relationships become pretty easy. Like I'm no longer trying to um control or be angry, or just it's not a whole lot of wasted energy. When I was angry and I wanted to kind of pay him back for all the shit he was, not there at for me in sports events, everything, I was just like, man, it's just, and when it comes from like a place of forgiveness, and so I think there's a big part of like men and women, but me speaking to men doing men's work, like a big part of growth is making amends, if you will, forgiving others, forgiving yourself, and then all that leaky energy, actually allows you to start feeling your nervous system starting to feel safe, and again, coming back around full circle, I feel like that's a big part of um, why men feel like they're spinning. And like I said, women too, because I've coached them for over 10 years. Why so many women that I worked with were overeaters, was because that it was just their way of finding peace and security, in their nervous system. They calmed the nervous system. Otherwise, it just felt like, so, that just was their security blanket, or their coping mechanism. And so many of us, whether it be porn, drinking, drugs, gambling, work, YouTube, social media, there's a lot there that I've just been asking myself over the years, like, what would it look like if I were to let all of that stuff go, and what could I really pour myself into if I didn't have all those distractions, So I digress.
It's so useful to raise awareness around all of those things. Vulnerability.
Mm.
You know, there's obviously a program and a status quo that vulnerability is weak for men, or it's again that's part of maybe the wounded masculine, or just the old paradigm. Is it helpful in men's work? And if so, why?
Helpful, I think it's instrumental. I think it's an absolute requirement in men's work, women's work, in us as human beings. Good luck having a relationship with someone else. whether it be it's opposite sex or same sex, it doesn't matter. We're all, built very similarly, or having relationships with children or coworkers if you don't have vulnerability, right? Um, so obviously Brene Brown talks so much about it, and I've learned so much from her, but then also just going to men's retreats
Yeah.
that I've been not leading, but I've just been a part of. A big part of that healing is vulnerability, it's surrendering. It's just that I think it's a little bit more challenging for men in some regards because that masculine wiring. Um, we always want to just give our gift of a solution, and women do this, of course, too. It just depends on whether we're in our masculine or feminine. But if we are in that solution providing mode, um, vulnerability almost feels like you're opening yourself up for like cracks in the solution that you want to give, right? And so whether it's you're providing for your family financially or providing for your family, um, physically, emotionally, I do feel like sometimes men, the masculine 1.0 feels like vulnerability is a threat to their sense of self. When it couldn't be further from the truth. It's kind of like vulnerability is the instrument used to crack oneself open to find a much bigger, fuller, evolved version of themselves.
Amazing. Yeah. I ran into someone one time and they were like, I want to do men's work, but I'm not ready to be vulnerable. And it's okay if we're not ready, right? But and I'm sure you probably come across this, whether people say it that directly or not. You might just like sense it, or or maybe people have that reflection later after the fact, like looking back. What are your thoughts on that?
I kind of call BS, quite frankly.
That the control? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like um, I'm ready to be a millionaire and I know how to, but I'm just not ready to go for it yet. It's like, oh, yeah, that's more or less someone saying I'm just too scared to do it. And I get it because there have been plenty of times that I've wussed out on things, but I just, yeah. Again, whether it's showing up to a mastermind and there's people there that are making, six figures a month and I was struggling to, make rent, or going to seminars, you know, where there's so many amazing and wealthy people there, and I'm sitting in the way back, having put that ticket on credit card, living off of credit cards for over a year, like all that stuff. I think again, it's just for me, it's been the path to um, really to healing because our egos always say I'm not ready, or I want to get my ducks in a row. I want to create like safety, if you will, before I take that leap. And I've really realized it's always like it's the opposite of what we sometimes inherently want to do. Like I'm angry, I want to run out the door. I want to wait, I'll run away from this relationship. I want to run away from this sales opportunity or the conversation. It's always like, okay, I feel that. I have to step into it anyways, right? So I do feel like it's always like it's the piece that's on the other side of the craziness, that we're so scared to get into. I just, in my experience, it's just, yeah, so obvious that now I just kind of know that when I start to feel that, I'm like, okay, then I'm on the right path. Now I just have to really put my head down and run right through it, rather than run away from it. And I'm not always perfect by any means. It gets the best of me sometimes for sure, but yeah, I would call BS on that guy saying you're never, if you're just waiting until you're ready, you're never going to be ready. You just have to go, and that's why I think, when it comes to men's work, it's why it's so important that men have other men around each other because they can call that out in a loving way, and challenge each other into a bigger version of themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of that acronym of fear, the more positive one, face everything and rise.
Mm, mm.
There is the false events appearing real. Actually, that one's pretty accurate too,
It
right? Because
is. Yeah,
someone has a fear of being vulnerable, they're imagining or expecting things to go wrong or for them to be rejected or
yep,
judged. If they put themselves in a intentional circle and in community, that can lessen the probability of that.
100%. 100%. And how many days, weeks, months, years slip by preparing to move rather than just moving, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the four pillars of fitness?
Well, I would say when it comes down to, we oftentimes think of physical fitness, right? The way that I kind of talk about it in my book, and the way that I see it in life in general, um, is that you've got to be, yes, physically fit, financially fit, spiritually fit, relationally fit, right? So those are the four pillars, and without one of those or multiples of those, it's just like a stool, obviously, that you're gonna have a hard time feeling secure in that, right? So I've just met too many men, and I would say my dad would acknowledge that too. Did very well financially, but he sacrificed his health for 30 years. And then you have lots of money, and if you're not healthy to enjoy it, then that's a struggle, right? You could have great physical fitness and great financial fitness, but if your relational spirit, your marriage is going down the tubes, then and your kids hate you. What does that look like? So those are the four pillars that of course, I go deeper into in my book. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that because it's like this comprehensive approach. Old paradigm or just our older way of doing things, we compartmentalize stuff, especially our parents' generation, your dad, my dad, or like, and their grandparents. It was like more of a separate, way of doing things. What's the name of your book? And do you have anything in there you want to share, whether it's an expert or excerpt, or if you just want to mention something powerful in there?
Yeah, it's just called Becoming Kings. It's a play on my last name, but I do feel like it's one of those things that's it talks a lot about my journey, if you will, but I work hard to kind of make it relatable to anyone. So I'm surprised actually that more women read it, because I do definitely focus on men. But yeah, I mean, it could be geared towards just human beings in general, right? One of the things that I dove into Tony Robbins, but granted, I've done so many other programs as well. But one of the first things I feel like, I alluded to it earlier, when I kind of had that moment when my marriage had failed, my mom was gone, my dad was nowhere to be found at that point, um, and I kind of lost all of the human support women that I would say I would normally lean on. A question, or a thing that I learned out of Tony Robbins' convention, if you will, came to me that I talk about in the book too. So I won't take credit for it, but he just talked about the quality of your life being directly proportionate to the quality of the questions you ask yourself. So I was asking myself at the time, like, how did I get here? Why like, how did my life turn out to be so horrible? And that quickly received an answer in my head, which was like, because you were a crappy husband, and you're a horrible, you're not intelligent, and you failed second grade, and like all like my childhood story. And that question, or that statement that Tony Robbins taught me, kind of popped in my mind. It's like, okay, I'm asking myself really, really low quality questions. So no better time than this to shift. And I said, okay, how, like, what popped in my head, and I would give it all the credit to God, was like, how could this moment be kind of the catalyst? Like, if my life were a movie, when does me hitting rock bottom turn into, me rising out of the ashes? You know what I mean? And I was like, okay, how could this be the catalyst to my story, and what should I be doing? And what, it just was one word that just came, and it just was give. And I was like, what again, my question, like, what do I have to give? I was like, what don't you have to give? Like, I'm so blessed being an American and being educated and being a white male Christian. Like, I could just keep stacking all of the benefits, but it's like, dude, at the very least, I can just give my energy. So that's when I started to go, you know, uh, talk scripture to guys in prison, and that sort of thing. And that kind of lent itself to eventually starting my gyms, and then the rest is history. But it was just when I felt like I had nothing else to give. You always have more to give, as long as you have a pulse and breath in your lungs, so you have something more to give. So yeah, the quality of your life is directly proportionate to the quality of the questions you ask yourself. So if you got some bad things going on in your life, maybe you can look at, your own questioning inside your head. So that definitely has resonated a lot for me over the years.
Amazing. By the way, I love the powerful question thing. I had got wind of that somehow. Could have been through Tony Robbins as well.
Yeah.
And I started asking myself, actually the one of the question, who are you, who am I not?
Hmm.
That was powerful probably during COVID, because it literally had to unravel some of the identities that I was carrying. And then another question that I was asking myself was, oh, what will move the needle today? And
Mm.
for some people that could be a productivity thing, but oftentimes for me, it doesn't have to be about productivity. Like last week, it was like a static dance. That will move the needle. That will move the energy.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
love that. I thank you for that reminder about the powerful questions.
Oh yeah. And it wasn't 2020 that way for a lot of us. It's actually kind of like such a fun time for like introspection, and
Yeah.
also really, really confronting, you know,
Yeah.
in a lot of
Very
different ways.
confronting.
Very
Yes.
confronting, right? So you either went down with the ship, or you know, got on the little
Did a drastic change.
lifeboat, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
There was
yeah,
a lot that popped up in your awareness, and it was a
yeah,
rude awakening.
yeah.
Yeah.
Amen. Amen. Right.
So when you were writing the book, you could take this question two ways. Either when you were writing the book, did you think about how you wanted people to feel when they were receiving it, or have people told you recently how they feel when they completed it, or the journey through the book?
Genuinely, I think when I started thinking about a question like that, which I did, I overwhelmed myself and I shut down. I couldn't write from that place because, to me, I was still so insecure, um, and just kind of beat up by life and struggling, that to put that level of responsibility or pressure on my shoulders that I was speaking to the masses, I couldn't handle it, to be totally honest. I couldn't handle it. And so I was writing a book that I didn't believe anyone would read or listen. I just wrote a book. It was therapeutic. Both that and my podcast, which I started, a couple months after I started, writing my book, was all therapeutic. Just to speak. I didn't care if anyone's listening. I could care less about viewers or listeners or readers. So I was writing that book to a younger version of me, if because I'd spent all of 2019 sitting down. I did over 100 coffees over the years with guys that were coming into my meetings of men, and then meeting with me afterwards. I'm like, what are you working on? Like, what's the biggest challenge, man? I was really trying to get to the core of the issue so that I could, frame my messaging around solving their biggest problem. None of them knew. I was like, oh, they all just knew that what they were doing wasn't working. Like I said earlier in the beginning of this conversation, they knew what they were doing wasn't working, but they had no idea where to go, which to me actually opened my eyes to, like, okay, talk about lost boys. These are all men who are little boys, in big boys' bodies, who haven't had fathers. They all not uniquely, I should say, didn't have a male role model, right? And so I just wrote to that little boy in me, which just so happened to um, speak to other men. And I'm still surprised at how, like, I keep getting checks from Audible, and more guys keep buying the book or listening to it. I'm like, I'm not doing any promotion of the thing really, and I'm like, this is cool. This is really, really special. But I don't. Again, I there's a part of me that, if I were to be thinking about blasting it to the universe, I couldn't. I felt like that would kind of taint how I show up. And I just wanted every interaction, whether it be this podcast or a book, or just to be as authentically me. So if they ran into me at the grocery store, I'd be like, hey man, it's like, oh, you're the same guy. I'm like, yeah. Where I know so many people that put on something, they put on their act, and then you find out that they're an a-hole, off camera, or like, yeah, again, wounded people, with power is a horrible, horrible thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. It's to me, I translate that as you were just so present, right? Like you were present with just writing the book in that moment, not thinking about, when people buy it, how they will feel, what's the transformation. And so, yeah, some of us do operate well that way. And then some of us, I think, need to see more of the vision.
Mm.
And I
Hmm.
think I might be more of that vision person at times. I guess it kind of depends on if I'm regulated in my nervous system first.
Totally, totally. Well, I think that you're right, and that's why I feel like there's different strokes for different folks. I can't say that, and that's why in my book I kind of speak from my perspective, but because I can't really speak from anyone else's perspective. So the best you can do is just speak your truth and let it go from there. For I know for me personally, it's just even over the last couple of years, it's like, what would life look like if I actually pulled myself off of social media and just took
Mm,
it off my phones and just went totally, mute in certain ways, and that has actually for me personally been super powerful too, because it just kind of quieted the storm, if you will, to where I could, again, it's kind of similar to how 2020 was for me, to where I could come back to asking the question of what moves the needle. Who do I really want to be? What's really important? Do I need millions of dollars to be happy? Would I, you probably see that thing on social media. Like, I think they say like 20 years from now, or even 10 years from now, would you give up all the money in the world to have the health and the youth that you have in this present moment?
mm.
you know? And I'm like, "Hey, yeah, I probably would, that I can still play sports and still run around and the kids and do whatever. Like 20, 30 years from now, and I see my dad's ailing health, I'm like, man, all the stuff that we work so hard to achieve in this three-dimensional, you know, human dream, if you will, is so kind of insignificant, especially seeing my mom pass away and she didn't take anything with her. It's like, so really questioning, like, what is it that truly, truly matters, right? And to your point, it's just being present. It's just being a wonderful person, a loving person, and just helping other people heal, which is what you're doing with this Power and Purpose podcast, which is amazing. So I give you
Yeah.
kudos.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. And, do you have a message for any men? We'll just keep it with men for right now, who are feeling lost or stuck in life. And you've been through so much adversity because, losing your mom and just so much change and like things crumbling, in the moment. So I feel like, yeah, if you have a message for anyone who might be in similar situations or just feeling lost or stuck.
Yeah, for men, but I would say it for women too. Is that you need to find your brotherhood and sisterhood. There's so much of that happening, and if a guy doesn't have a bunch of other male friends, men who are going to hold him to a higher level of integrity and accountability, then he needs to find that. And you can very quickly get online and search that out. Why I feel like that's so important, though, also for women to have their sisterhood. For men, especially though, because men typically don't sit around and talk about their feelings, where women probably more likely do. Men just need repetition in the same way that you need repetition in the gym. Um, I didn't know this, and so I dove into Tony Robbins, but he was the first example of like a fully integrated masculine role model who ebbs and flows artistically between his masculine and feminine in interventions, right? So beautifully without losing his center of being a grounded masculine man. He's definitely a masculine man, but he can be so intimate and loving and, heartfelt,
Passion.
compassionate, right? And I was just like, what? And so just listening to his CDs over and over and over again, um, allowed me to then have some of the verbiage to then speak to other friends, men or siblings or women in my life, and that started allowing me to get in touch with my own emotional art, and to be vulnerable, which leads to the healing. So men need to be around other men, even if they just go to men's meetings and they just sit there quiet for 6 months. Just being around other men who are doing the emotional fitness and the emotional lifting is powerful because that'll bring them up. So that's what I would say is men who are stuck, and at some point though, you got to put yourself out there. You can't just sit there and listen and think that you're going to grow or heal by osmosis. You have to actually start to um, give, not just receive. Right? You just have to actually get and be vulnerable and say the scary things and see where that takes you. So that would be my 2 cents worth.
That's powerful. I think it's powerful because we get stuck in isolation or we don't want anyone to see us or hear us or feel us. And so it's powerful. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you have, as we start to wrap up, do you have either a powerful quote or a book recommendation? You could recommend yours and another one if you want.
For men who are maybe listening to this, since I'm kind of speaking to them, one of my good buddies, Traver Baum, has Man Uncivilized. His books, his series of books. He has several. He's actually here in Golden, or he's down in Costa Rica. It's hard to find where he is. He's all over the place, but he's got an amazing men's group, men's movement. Let's say I would highly recommend anyone um, picking up his book, and it's funny, it's relatable, and yeah, the kind of the groups even that he has online for guys that feel like they can't even find people locally. So I'm not going to let you get out of that one either. If you feel like, oh, there's no men's groups in my area, I live in, whatever, the woods of Alaska. Like, if you're listening to this, you've got internet, you can get online and connect with Traver Bolem's men's groups online. So I'd recommend any of that stuff. Yeah.
So, if this conversation really resonated with you, please reach out, connect with Johnny King. We have his links in the description. His website is johnnyking.com, super simple and easy. And then Instagram and Facebook links are also there as well. So, how can people connect with you deeply? Is it just going to your website? Is it a different way? Can they work with you in a special capacity?
Yeah, I mean, they're open to coaching, and they are open to showing up. Certainly, they can connect with me on, again, anything you just mentioned, any of my social media or my website handles, and we can talk about that. I do have your DIY programs, of course, online, or just pick up my book if that's helpful to listen to get to know me. But yeah, I'm always open to the conversations. So the first step is just actually reaching out and connecting, which takes a little vulnerability and courage.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for this conversation. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your wisdom and your grounded energy. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you today.
Well, thank you, and thanks for putting it on, and thanks for being a voice to powerful stories and people that also want to keep giving their gifts. So I appreciate it. Hopefully, it helps someone that's listening.
I'm sure it will. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Namaste and have a great day.